So I'll be talking a little bit about digestive health. Yes, somebody yesterday said he was a party pooper, but our mission is to make sure that everybody at a party is a pooper. So I'll be able to tell you about that in a bit. So we're an enterprise solution and a pharma solution for GI conditions. 75% or 74% of Americans have some sort of digestive disorder and really don't know what to do about it. I'm sure that many of you have probably experienced some of these symptoms as well. You go to a restaurant and you don't feel very well, or you know some other people who go to a restaurant and something they ate, or so they say they ate, they come back and they have explosive diarrhea. Pretty bad situation if you're on a date, for example. There's also people who actually eat food and have reflux and belching and abdominal gas. There's not probably a one of us in this audience who hasn't experienced any of these things, undigested food in the stool and all that. Huge problem, and I'll just show you that gut disease is really increasing at about 10% per year. Maybe it's just because of the food chain and a variety of different things. It's also bigger than diabetes. At least in the United States, there's about 70 million people who have diabetes compared to about 70 million people who have digestive, with about 35 million people who have diabetes. It's a major pipeline in pharma. If you just go to any of the pharmas, you'll see that they're developing drugs for IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, the biologics in particular, and I'll show you about that in a minute. And if you go to any sort of pharmacy, CVS or Walgreens, you'll find that almost all of the over-the-counter products, they're really in the top 10 for digestive products, Imodium, a variety of different things. So it's really a very large market, and as I'll show you in a minute, it's really in the top 5 of all the employers' healthcare costs. And it's really the #1 cause of absenteeism. And you know, you probably have heard the folks, I've got a tummy ache, and that tummy ache, I can't go to work. It really is a big deal, at least in the United States, this tummy ache. Well, for employers, but primarily who's our customer, we're a B2B solution, and I'll show you some of the other parts that we're in. It's really in the top 5 of employers' healthcare costs. And what we've seen, it ranges anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000 a year for these folks. And that combines not only the medical, but also the pharmacy costs. It's a huge cost. These folks also have lots of surgery, so there's surgery in between. So if you know anybody who's had Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or any of these other ones, or diverticular disease, you know that they probably have had at least one surgery, for example. And so they're in and out of the hospital, and of course the average length of stay, which is the time that they're actually, the complication of the surgery, is also quite long. So it's a very expensive category of conditions. I said it's also a major play for pharma. There's really not a pharma player that we know that is not working in the digestive health space. Primarily, again, in the biologics. The best-selling drug of all time is Humira, which is made by AbbVie. And then you've got Remicade by Johnson & Johnson, and Stelara by Johnson & Johnson, and Entyvio, for example. So these are very, very expensive drugs, upwards about $60,000 per individual per year. So it's a pretty big pain point for employers who are actually paying for the bill for here. So what is GI Thrive? GI Thrive is a solution that we developed because the digestive conditions are so broad. You have upper digestive, you have lower digestive, and even the liver. It's a broad category that needs really sort of a common foundation or a platform. It also is important because it can work for health plans, employers, GI groups, across in pharma, as well as consumers and PBMs, or pharmacy benefit managements, like the CVS, for example, and Express Scripts. So it's a digital therapeutic, as well as a wraparound, what I call Drugs Plus solution that serves each of these markets. So what is it? So it's part digital therapeutics, and the beauty of being able to use digital therapeutics is that software allows us to be able to not only collect the data, but also to look at the patterns in the data. So for example, one of the things that we apply is really food as medicine. Just think about how difficult it is if you sit in front of a plate of food and then you have an adverse reaction, diarrhea or constipation, whatever it is, to know which of those foods really has induced that reaction. Or folks who have irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, what are these foods really are the inflammatory triggers? But it's really nice because software allows us to take a look at these patterns and to be able to identify some of the inflammatory foods that cause actually these symptoms. And so digital monitoring allows us to be able to pick out the inflammatory foods as well as to be able to understand what are some of the interventions that these folks need. The other part is it's diagnostics and discovery science. Every person who comes into our program, or most every person who comes into the program, because it's a digestive condition, gives us a stool sample. That's why we go to any party and we're the party poopers. So we'll take a stool sample, and in the stool sample, we'll be able to analyze the microbiome. And at this particular stage, although it's in its infancy, the type of spectrum of bacteria really gives us a handle or an understanding of what the person's gut looks like. And so that if they're presented with certain foods, some of these bacteria then are known to actually induce this inflammatory response. And so we do take a stool sample, and our quest really is to be able to look at that stool sample, provide food as medicine to start reducing the bacteria that cause the inflammatory response. And so we do a lot of the microbiome and follow the microbiome as a diagnostic marker as well. We have a device, because we're multidisciplinary here, is a device, which is a breath analyzer. And what this breath analyzer does is just like a blood glucose monitor, where before someone actually will eat, they'll breathe into this device and it'll measure hydrogen gas. Well, why hydrogen gas? You can measure methane, but we actually want to blow on this where the hydrogen comes. The hydrogen is a byproduct of the metabolism of the bacteria in your gut. So if your gut are actually metabolizing foods and the bacteria are, not your intestine, the bacteria produce a lot of gas. And in fact, that is the symptom that someone experiences when they eat gassy foods, for example, beans, where they start to get bloated or they actually start to have diarrhea. This allows us to measure the amount of hydrogen that's produced, essentially, so that if it's really a very high level and your digestive activity is really moving, then it would be really best not to digest or eat a food that actually is going to produce additional hydrogen gas. So we have a device very much like a blood glucose monitor so that people will know how many carbs to eat. In this particular case, avoid the foods that are going to produce additional gas. Analytics, we're very data rich. We get a lot of medical claims and pharmacy claims from our employer clients, as well as we collect real-time data on a real-time scale. And then, of course, we're really outcomes focused. We really didn't build this platform on a technology basis. We came from the clinical point of view to solve a clinical problem, how we can make people with irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease or celiac disease really reduce their symptoms and reduce their drug use. So we're very focused on that. So here's what we've done. Because the broadness of digestive diseases, we needed to build a platform that really is multidisciplinary. It would be as if you were walking into a clinic that actually had very different types of disciplines. Some people need food, some people need to understand how their medications are, some people need to have education, and some people really need to start reducing the anxiety and stress that exacerbate their digestive problems. So our platform is multidisciplinary, all backed by a real human care team at the very end, essentially, supported by Gut Check and GI Mate, Smarter Meds in terms of what we do for medication optimization, habit-forming courses, and therapeutic nutrition. So it's a multidisciplinary platform, bringing a multidisciplinary platform to this digital center. So one way that it works essentially is that this device essentially is really the gateway to someone's sort of well-being and the digestive health. So just like someone who has diabetes, you blow into the device, it tells you what your digestive activity, and basically it opens up the app essentially so that you can have a gateway to food as medicine, Smarter Meds, or Gut Site Assistant. The Gut Site Assistance is the following. People who actually have digestive problems, sometimes when they have diarrhea, or anybody who has diarrhea, can get dehydrated very quickly. And so that's really very, very important. So when we know that someone actually has successive bouts of diarrhea, We have something that's like a car on call, for example. Immediately, someone will respond, and we'll have one of the nurses or a dietitian or someone on our care team to be able to rescue this person so they don't actually come into the ER. So gut-side assistance is our 24-hour sort of catch line. Well, let me just give you a couple of examples. I'll show you that some of the benefits, and then I'll show you where we've gotten traction. Here's an individual who's had ulcerative colitis. He's been on Remicade for a number of years. He was put on one of our programs, mostly in terms of changing his diet and also monitoring the gas levels. And after a while, his symptoms started to disappear, and he was able to down titrate or bring down his Remicade. He would go in every 6 weeks and get an infusion. Obviously, that's a change in the quality of life. And essentially be able to live what he was doing. Well, after 6 weeks on our program, not only did he have a digestive disease, but he also had psoriasis, which is also an immune disease, which goes along with a lot of these bowel symptoms. And you can see after the diets, essentially, on many of the diets, his psoriasis also cleared. So there's an additional benefit of reducing the inflammatory foods on other symptoms. I'll give you a little bit of data here in terms of producing great outcomes for employers. In some of the cases, we're able to save upwards of $5 million with an ROI of about 200%. And we have a number of clients, which I'll show you in a minute, essentially. And I'll move to this right here in a minute. We have a number of clients that we're working with, health plans. We are working with jumbo clients, 40,000 to 50,000 and above. We're working with the health plans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, in many of the states. We are providers just as doctors would be. We bill through a medical claim and get reimbursed just like providers would be in a clinic. And we have very large clients, US Foods, Dean Foods, EPAM, MGM Resorts, which are based in Las Vegas. That's a client of 70,000 folks and onboarding. A couple of our other partners have employees over 1 million, and these are some of our current clients. The business model is for employers, we're based on a fee for service, just like doctors would be. So whatever services we provide, we get paid for. We're also paid as a bundled rate. We're paid close to $70 per participant per month. And so the reason that we're using jumbo employers is because actually there are a number of these individuals within these populations. We're also distributed by PBMs, CVS, for example, and other sort of venues. Why are we different? Well, we're the first solution in digestive health. We're using big data to be able to identify some of the clinical interventions. It's a comprehensive multidisciplinary solution that we're using. Intellectual property, we've got 2 issued and 4 patents pending. And the last thing I'll say, we've raised to date $14 million, and we'll be doing a Series B sometime in the spring. And then the very last thing I'll say right here is this is our team. We're a well-seasoned team. I founded the company, the diabetes company, which is now called Livongo. Alan Spiro was a founder of Accolade and Towers Watson. Bill Snyder was the former chief commercial officer at Virta, which is a diabetes company. Chloe, who's in the audience, was at Cerner here in the UK. We have a very experienced and seasoned team that's been working in the digital health space for quite a long time. Thank you.